Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Hilaal Live. My name is Fahraaz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us. I'm opening the show today as from 7 o'clock, Luqman and the team in Cape Town will be in Bukap for a ceremony that will be happening to show sympathy towards the people of Palestine, but most importantly, make dua for them as they go through these difficult times. Now, decades before, it was only Arabs and Muslims that were joining in the plight of the Palestinians. Over a period of time, and as the evolution of social media occurs, more Christians, Jews, and even those who do not have a monolithic faith are showing a sympathetic stance towards the struggle of Palestinians, and also at the same time are strongly condemning the brutality of the Israeli government. It may not only be the woke culture, but it is just being human and having that sympathy when you see a baby being pulled out of the rubble from the buildings that collapsed due to continuous bombing by the IDF in Gaza. To talk about this, I'd like to bring in a former Zionist Christian, Pamela Ngubane. She's based in Centurion here in South Africa. And from the United States, she's part of an alternative media website called the Grayzone Anya Parampil. Ladies, good day and thank you so much for joining us.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having us.
Wa alaikum salam. No, it's an absolute pleasure. Pamela, I want to start with you. Just a few months ago, of course, I saw your articles and you were very much for Zionism and its implementation in Israel. What has changed over these last few months? Just to give the viewers an idea of that evolution towards that.
So it's very interesting that, there's always a silver lining in everything. And my silver lining with the swearing in of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government is that I got to see the true face of Israel. And that's what changed, is that I realized that I was actually supporting a state run by people who had no intention of making peace with the Palestinians and who had every intention of taking up every single piece of land that belongs to the Palestinians. Before the State of Israel was created by the United Nations in 47, in that resolution, I can't remember the number, but anyway, the Zionists said, if we could have a piece of land the size of a tablecloth, we'll take it. Obviously, they were lying, and the lies of the Zionists persist to this day, like the 40 decapitated babies, which has now been proven to be false. So I realized that I was supporting a bunch of liars, thieves, and on top of that, who had happily used my belief in God as a weapon against the Palestinians. And so for me, that was unconscionable. The Quran says there's no greater injustice than the person who lies about the Almighty. And so I felt it very deeply, and I knew I couldn't stay in that job. But I tried to stay initially by promoting peace dialogues between us and the pro-Palestinian side. But it became very clear to me that my bosses of South African Zionist Federation and my co-bosses, I could say, in the South African Jewish Board of Deputies were not interested in talking to the Palestinians. And they had this concept that everyone who is pro-Palestine is automatically anti-Semitic and threatening. But obviously now I know that they were afraid of the truth, because the truth is the greatest enemy of the Zionist state.
Anya, I want to bring you in. I was obviously doing some research. There's the number of $8 billion US, and then in America right now, some factories that manufacture automobiles are going on strike for higher pay. One may suggest that America is going through a bit of an economic challenge right now. So where did that 8 billion just come from? I would like to assume that the genie didn't just pop out of the bottle and he just magically appeared with $8 billion US to help their good friend, Israel. Anya? Anya, are you there?
It actually is a genie in a lot of ways that pops out of the bottle and makes this happen. It's the same genie that popped out of the bottle and found hundreds and billions of dollars for the Ukrainian regime, which is kind of a pea in a pod with Israel and the apartheid regime in Tel Aviv. subsisting off of US taxpayer support when, as you say, we here in the United States are not living under the greatest conditions. There's incredible inflation. People are struggling to afford food. And yet there is money to be found for Israel and for Ukraine. And it's so interesting for me to hear Pamela's story. That's just incredible. And it's exactly why I, as an American, have benefited so much from traveling around the world and meeting people like her and others that demonstrate the world is far more complex than we in the West realize. There are people going through this evolution and understanding the truth about Palestine on so many levels. And I think especially the Christian perspective at this time is so important because in the United States, there has been a decades-long initiative to really brainwash Christians into believing that the Zionist apartheid regime is their ally or their friend. And this is very dangerous, very incorrect. And it is the base of US support for Israel in many ways, is having this Christian evangelical base that they've lobbied, they fund them to go on trips, bring them on tours throughout Israel to try and convince them that this is a state that they need to support. And so I feel like perspectives like Pamela's are so important, even in the US to hear right now.
Ladies, this question is for both of you. Post 9/11, a lot of the rhetoric was the Muslim is the enemy, the Arab is the enemy. Hence, you saw the United States and its allies going into Afghanistan and Iraq. Till today, none of those invasions were justified because there was no weapons of mass destruction, and they couldn't even find Osama bin Laden at that time. How, both of you, of course, who do not have a history of being from the Muslim faith, how has this, when you look back at 9/11 and you look at where you have become now, do you feel that that narrative towards that Arabs and Muslims are the scum of the earth, how has that changed? I want to start with you, Pamela.
So Islamophobia is one of the pillars of Christian Zionism, you know, and in many respects, you know, global empire has benefited from Islamophobia. Because if people knew, which they don't know, you'll probably be shocked and surprised to know that Christians generally don't know that Muslims are a brother religion, that they worship the same God. They don't know that. I didn't know that, you know, until I started reading the Quran. Literally the day I quit my job, well, when I went to the office to give them back their stuff and be like, I'm out of here forever, I started to listen to an audio of the Quran, and I was blown away by the truth I was listening to. And it really moved me, and I've been reading it since, you know, but like people don't know, and it's manufactured that way that people don't know. So 9/11, what it did, and it happened just a few days after the World Conference Against Racism in Durban in 2001. That conference was the beginning of the end of people's acquiescence to the domination of empire on the people of this world. 9/11 happened, and it scuppered those attempts to bring to light the inequalities that we have been conditioned to live under. And Islamophobia just shot up, and it was given the biggest boost since like the Reconquista, you know, like for real. So, but this invasion by Hamas, when I told my brother about it, it felt like the same feeling of shock when I told him about 9/11. We were both at university at that time, but it was different in terms of the outcome, which I think is going to happen. Whereas 9/11 took us away from the Muslims and made the Muslims persona non grata, I believe this invasion of Hamas into the occupied territories of Palestine is going to bring the world closer to Islam and the Muslim world. And it's also going to revive that movement that was scuppered by 9/11, 2001.
Anya, I want to bring you into this because in America, the former president, George W. Bush, I mean, he made sure that, look, every single Muslim, even living in America, needs to be dealt with because they were all seen as under one bubble. Islamophobia became on the rise in the United States. A lot has changed, hasn't it? Because of alternative media sites like yourself and free-thinking people that really said, no, this is not the way it's supposed to be.
Yes, there has definitely been a breakthrough over the last several years, especially as we saw the blowback of the wars in the Middle East, that the campaigns in Iraq, and then more recently Syria with Libya, Afghanistan, everything in between are regarded as failures, and rightfully so. And they were regarded as failures for the American people, not only the people in whose countries we destroyed throughout that period. And I see this current conflict in Palestine as part of that blowback, because none of these wars happen in a vacuum. The war in Iraq is not disconnected from Palestine. This was part of a grand mission, an agenda put forward by the transatlantic powers, essentially the United States and Britain, to break the Arab nationalist movement, the pan-Arab movement, the regional support for Palestine by breaking down these strong states that were opposed to U.S. empire. But it's amazing to be here in 2023 and see that for all the war and the destruction the way the West waged throughout the Middle East, they did not defeat the resistance. In fact, it's stronger than ever. Hezbollah is primed and readied as a result of the Syria conflict, also demonstrated its military capabilities during that war. And Israel was right there all along, engaged in that aggression on Syria and taking notes. And I think this military operation that was conducted on the 7th took the Israelis by surprise. I don't think they are prepared for a urban warfare scenario in the Gaza Strip. They're certainly not prepared for a multi-front war with Hezbollah and whoever else in the region would be moved to join. So I'm afraid that they are the only move forward, other than a prisoner swap and peace negotiation, which I think would be great, is for them to get the United States involved directly. And so I'm very concerned when I see the decision of the Biden administration to send U.S. naval carriers to the region, or aircraft carriers to the region. And also I am concerned for U.S. troops stationed in Syria and Iraq. I think they should be pulled out all across the region and brought home, because at this point they are sitting ducks for something that may become a very serious regional conflict.
Ladies, we'll continue this conversation after the break. You're tuning to Hilaal Live here on Hilaal TV. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. I'm still in conversation with Pamela Ngubane and Anya Parampil. Anya, I want to come to you. I had a chance to visit, of course, the Grayzone's YouTube site, and one of your colleagues, of course, went to Times Square, where there was, on one side, a pro-Palestine march, and on the other, a pro-Israeli march. The pro-Palestine march, a lot for it, you know, calling for there to be some sort of resolution to protect the people of Gaza. And then we go to the pro-Israeli one, where there were, well, if not all Zionists, and the talk was genocidal. That's scary, isn't it?
It is scary, and it's precisely why Israelis and Zionists are in many ways the greatest way to convince people of the ugly face of the Zionist project and the Israeli apartheid regime. I mean, I know from my experience being there, and my own coworker and husband, Max Blumenthal, early on in his journalism career, went viral just by going into the Israeli streets in Jerusalem, or it was Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, going to the bars and interviewing Israelis that were out about Arabs, about Palestinians, even about Barack Obama. This was the time when Obama had just taken office for the first time in the United States. And they were just, and these are just casual people in the street. They were so racist, so extremely genocidal and hateful that those clips of them just talking about their opinions went super viral. And again, I think it's the best way to convince people of what the Israeli regime is, just hearing them speak. And knowing, for example, that in 2014, groups of Israeli citizens got together in lawn chairs and watched the bombardment of Gaza as if it were a sporting event. It is precisely why also everything that the international media establishment that is pro-Israel and Zionist, or any talking head in the media, the line that they take about Hamas or about Palestinians teaching their children to hate or having no morals and having no ethics and no value for human life, all of that is projection of what is the actual Israeli perspective of the world.
Pamela, I want to come to you. If I stand to be corrected, you attended yesterday's pro-Palestine march here in Sandton, Johannesburg. When you looked at it, the perception's changing, isn't it? Because they weren't just, people that look like me, Indian Muslims. They were our fellow Black Africans, our fellow white compatriots, our fellow colored compatriots, because it's human to feel this way. When you see a baby being pulled out of the rubble, when you see a mother losing her children, it does take a human to just realize how bad, how horrible, and how sad the situation is down in Gaza.
Yes, and the dehumanization of the Palestinian people is why what is happening in Gaza is happening. When that minister, I think, I can't remember his name now, but when he said we are dealing with human animals,
the foreign minister, the defense minister, sorry, yes, Benny Gantz, yeah.
Now, empire functions on the basis of the dehumanization of the other, of the colonized. Capitalism, in many respects, also functions on the dehumanization of the worker. And you have to dehumanize the other person in order to justify doing what you're doing to them. And even like how Anya said, the lies that the Zionists tell about the Palestinians, when they're the ones who are actually doing the thing that they are accusing the Palestinians of, murdering babies, raping women, molesting children in prison. That's what the Zionists are doing to the Palestinians. But they claim that's what the Palestinians are doing. You have to dehumanize the other so that when you're killing them and slaughtering them, the people who are watching say, well, they're not human anyway. And so, looking today at the press conference that Anthony Blinken and Benjamin Netanyahu had, it was just that. It was all about the can you imagine? They're sitting there lamenting about the death of Jewish settlers, lying about how they died. And then at the same time in Gaza, people are being bombed to smithereens, and they say, and then what does Herzog say? He says, this is not a retaliation, this is an operation or something. It is a retaliation. They want to kill everyone in Gaza. Why did they bomb the Rafah crossing? So when we as human beings start to recognize that if we don't stand up against this injustice that's happening to the Palestinians and to the injustice of all oppressed people around the world, then we become part of the dehumanization machine that is working against the Palestinians. And in the process, we lose our own freedom as well. And I think, though, with the economic decline, the endless wars, this ridiculousness of finding $8 billion for Israel to slaughter the Palestinians when Americans who have served in that military are living on the street homeless and sick because they can't afford anything that would make their lives secure. It tells us that humanity, it's waking humanity up to the reality that the system that we are in, it's dehumanizing. It was dehumanizing when the British started the Industrial Revolution and they took the land away from the peasants so that they would be forced into the mines and into the factories. And it's dehumanizing today when Palestinians are called human animals so that they can be ethnically cleansed, genocided from the land so that the land can all belong to the Zionists.
Anya, before we started this interview, I watched just an address by Noam Chomsky. And he said that America is obligated to Israel. I ask you this, to what extent are they obligated to Israel? Because it seems as if Israel is holding a chain towards Uncle Sam and dragging them wherever they go to.
That's precisely it. I would say the United States has zero obligation to Israel. I, as an American, believe in American sovereignty. I believe that America's interests are defined by its own borders and its own clearly defined region of influence, and meaning the Americas, and we should not be involved in the Middle East at all. Unfortunately, there are members of the political establishment, particularly in the Republican Party, as I said, coming out of this brainwashed and bought Christian right that is actively and aggressively attempting to define U.S. interests, national security interests, as directly tied to Israel, and not separate Israel's own security interests from our own, from ours. And that is dangerous because, as I said, Israel cannot move forward with this urban warfare scenario in Gaza. It cannot face a regional war without U.S. troops, and U.S. troops will die. And I don't want to see one more U.S. soldier die in the Middle East. I don't want to see any U.S. aircraft carrier sunk. And I think that this is it should be an inflection point for U.S. policy, because I do see now some, even in Congress and other in influential political circles, making the point that Israel's security is not actually ours. And that's the first time I've heard this point really break through in the media. And I think it's because the stakes are so high. It's starting to settle in reality that there could be a major war with Iran or Hezbollah. And the fact that there are elements in the U.S. trying to draw us into it has activated people, I think, to begin thinking critically. Is this something we actually want to do? Is this something we can do? And because of the experience of Ukraine, where there is a faction of the political establishment in the United States that is critical of blank check U.S. support for war, now, if anyone moves ahead with blind loyalty to Israel or another blank check for Israel, they will be regarded as hypocrites, because it's more dangerous in many ways, I think, to start playing with the Israel tinderbox than it was even to do in Ukraine.
Ladies, we've got a minute each for you. I just want to get your closing remarks. I'll start off with you, Pamela.
There's a thinker called Daniel Pipes. He's the head of the Middle East Forum. He wrote a paper on how Israel would achieve total victory. And he said that the way that can only be done is to completely eradicate the hope of the Palestinian people. I shudder to think that it might be true that right now this operation of bombing Gaza and the suggested ground operation is going to be in line with that advice from Daniel Pipes. Because I think Israel knows very well that they're losing public support around the world, and they know that people are seeing through the lies. And I think this might be their last-ditch attempt to hold on to that land. I hope it's not, but I fear that Daniel Pipes's vision of destroying the hope of the Palestinians as the path to victory might be what's going on. And, I was on a panel last night with Dr. Kuruyasha Suleiman, and
Yes,
she said,
yes.
People must pray for the Palestinians, that there is power in the spirit, in the spiritual world. There's power in prayer. God listens to prayers. So I would also encourage everyone, Muhammad said, peace be upon him, if you see injustice, you fight it with your hands, with your actions. If not, you fight it with your words. And if not, you fight it with your hearts. There's not much we can do, but we can do something, and that is to pray for our brothers and sisters in Palestine.
Anya, a minute to you.
the Israelis will do everything they can to crush the hope of the Palestinians. And I, from an American perspective, think our only position, I would love to see someone in my government call for an immediate ceasefire and offer to broker a prisoner swap and a peaceful solution to this. I think that Hamas would like that. I think that was their goal in taking in these hostages. We forget all of the Palestinian prisoners that are in Israeli custody are, I think, in the back of the minds of Hamas and the Palestinian people every day. And so if we could just do something peaceful like that, I think it would be a win for everyone. But if Israel does go ahead with this war and does try to crush the hope of the Palestinian people, they will fail, because the hope of the Palestinian people, it's the hope of humanity, something that you can't contain and you can't stop. You can't prevent people from walking toward their freedom, marching toward their freedom and their liberation. And so it's inevitable one way or another. The question is how much blood has to spill, and that's up to the Israelis.
Anya, Pamela, ladies, you've been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for making the time for us here on Hilaal Live. Much appreciated.
Thank you
very much.
Yeah. It's Anya Parampil from the Grayzone, and Pamela Ngubane, she was a former Zionist Christian. And as we go to sleep tonight, remember that the people of Gaza continue to find bodies in the rubble. They're receiving no medical care, no food, no energy, and also a big United States ship is coming, and the Israelis are about to do a ground force. Think about that for a minute. You don't even have to be a Muslim to think about that. You just need to be a human to put yourself in the shoes of the citizens of Gaza. After the break, I'll have your latest in news. Do stay tuned.